Right, welcome to the solution to problem 11-15 located on page 552. We have the St. Lucia Blood Bank. We've got, it's a private charity. They have, they collect blood. Let's see, so they just finished September operations. Busy month because of a powerful hurricane that hit. So the residents of St. Lucia willingly donated their blood to help people on other islands. As a consequence, the blood bank collected and processed 24% blood more than they had planned originally for the month. The report prepared below continued support from the government depends on the blood bank's ability to demonstrate control over its costs. Managing director of the blood bank was very unhappy with the report, claiming that his costs were higher than expected due to the emergency on the neighboring islands. Pointed out that additional costs had been fully covered by payments from grateful recipients. Government official who prepared the report countered that all the figures had been submitted by the blood bank to the government. He was just pointing out that actual costs were a lot higher than promised in the budget. Okay, so this is the problem with a static or master budget, right? So we are now required to prepare a new performance report for September using the flexible budget approach. And it says, even though some of these costs might be classified as direct costs rather than overhead, the flexible budget approach can still be used to prepare a flexible budget performance report. Organize your report along the format of Exhibit 11-7. Okay. 4 columns, actual, flexible budget, variance, and static budget. Do you think any of the variances in the report you prepared should be investigated and why? Okay. So, all right. So if we look at Exhibit 11-7, they've got 3 columns, actual, flexible budget, and then variance. The problem asks for 4, actual, flexible budget, variance, and static budget. I'm going to change the order a little bit, and we're going to put actual right about here. Then I'm going to put variance. Then I'm going to put flexible, and then lastly static. Why? Well, the idea here is that this variance column explains the difference between the column on its left and the column on its right. So we could stick another variance column in here, but it will become relatively obvious as we look at it, you know, what the distinction between the static and the flexible budget. So I'm not going to fuss too much about that. Okay. Now, before we get into the whole revenue and expenses, although in this case I'm not sure there's a revenue. No, it doesn't look like there is. We're going to want an activity level because that will help describe for us exactly what's going on. So the actual activity level was 620, whatever the heck it was, liters of blood collected. The flexible budget is going to, by default, be 620 as well, and the static budget was 500, right? So basically what we're doing is we're taking the static budget level of activity and flexing it up to the actual level of activity, flexing the cost. We probably want to squeeze in here a unit cost column as well. Okay. Let's, as we say, again, there's no revenue here. It's a not-for-profit organization, so we're going to jump right into variable costs. And we're told that the budget variable costs were, for medical supplies, sorry, that's... So medical supplies, $7,500. Okay. So what is the per unit cost then? Well, 7,500 divided by 500 units works out to a cost per unit of $15. Okay. So now we can take our per unit budgeted cost of $15 and multiply it by the new flexible budget amount, our activity level of 620, and that will give us a flexible budget amount for medical supplies of 9,300. And the actual we were told was 93.50. So the variance to get from the flexible to the actual is only $50, and in this case it is unfavorable. Okay, so hopefully you see how that works now, right? Lab tests. The static budget was 6,000. Actual was 6180. 6,000 divided by 500 is $12 per. 12 times the 620 gives us 7,440. So an increase, significant increase here. And so now the difference, oh look at that, we're going to have a favorable budget variance because the actual costs were lower. So if we do the math, we get $1,260 favorable. All right, that was lab tests. Next we have refreshments. And static budget on refreshments was 1,000. 1,000 divided by 500 is $2 per. Actual, 1340. And now flexible, $2 times the 620 should be 1240. 1240 to 1340 is a $100 unfavorable variance. And lastly, admin supplies. Static budget, $250. Actual was 400. 250 divided by 500 is 50 cents. So 50 cents times the 1240 is 50 cents times 620 rather is 310. And so we've got a $90 unfavorable variance there. Total variable costs. We can add this up and get $29.50. 17,270. Total variance 1,020 favorable because we got this big favorable variance here under the lab tests. Flexible budget 18,290, and finally static budget 14,750. Okay, so there's the total variable costs, fixed costs. Salaries, depreciation, rent, rent, and utilities. And on the static budget, they were 10,000, 2,500, 1,000, 500, for a grand total of $14,000. And in the flexible budget, they're going to be exactly the same, because remember, we're talking fixed costs now, so there's going to be no difference between the flexible budget and the static budget. Actual numbers, we got 10,000. Amortization 2,800. Rent was 1,000. Utilities 570. for a total of 14,370. And so variance, nothing in terms of salaries, 300 unfavorable on the depreciation, nothing on the rent and the utilities, $70 unfavorable, added up, 370 unfavorable. All right, total costs. So add these guys together and we get an actual total cost of 31,640, and that's right from the book. Static budget 28,750. But now the flexible budget, the more reasonable number to use, 32,290. And we can net our two variances here, and I get a $650 favorable variance. So that was redoing the budget. Part 2, or number 2, do you think any of the variances should be investigated? So looking at this then, what do we see? 70 bucks is pretty small, 300, okay, it's on depreciation, which normally is going to be the same month in, month out. So does this mean we need to investigate? Not really. There's some reasonable logical explanations. We might have added some new equipment which upped the amount of depreciation. So it's just because these are fixed costs doesn't mean that you're not going to have a variance between the flexible budget or the static budget and the actual. Okay, it just means that the cost doesn't vary with production. So it's not unreasonable. You know, presumably this is accurate. Normally it'll be the same every month. So you know, if last month was not 300 and you didn't buy anything, then yeah, you'd want to kind of wonder what the heck's going on. But as we look up here, 90 bucks, 100 bucks, yeah, whatever, 50 bucks. But this one here, lab test, 1260. It's not enormous, but it's big enough to go, wonder why. And, you know, we probably want to make sure that we're not cutting corners or doing anything like that. But there may well be a perfectly logical explanation. I'm just not sure what it is. So I'm going to ask the question next time I see the lab guys. And that concludes this particular problem.